Today, we're continuing our three-part series on sending your pastor's kid to college debt-free. In part one, we laid the foundation with early preparation strategies, and today we'll focus specifically on maximizing those crucial high school years. Before we dive in, I've been thinking about the parallels between planning for college and the story of Joseph in Egypt. When God showed Joseph there would be 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine, Joseph didn't just have faith that God would provide, though he absolutely did have that faith, he also took action. He created a detailed strategic plan and worked diligently to implement it. His story shows us that trusting God and taking practical action aren't opposites, they go hand in hand. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, that's great, but we're not exactly in a season of abundance right now. I get it. Ministry salaries often don't leave a lot of room for saving, and some of you may feel like you're already in those lean years. But here's the thing, whether we're in a season of plenty or barely making ends meet, the principles are the same. We trust God to provide, and we also need to be wise stewards and do our part with whatever resources He's given us, no matter how small they might seem. And some of that strategic planning and preparation can be things that don't cost you as the parent a single penny. And like Joseph, we need to be intentional about preparing during the years we have available. These high school years, whether they feel abundant or lean, are our opportunity to put systems and savings in place before those big expenses hit. And just as Joseph's planning helped save not just Egypt, but his own family, the financial decisions we make now will impact not just our own families, but also be an example to our entire church. So let's dive into some practical strategies for making the most of these critical high school years getting ready for college. Today, we're focusing on strategies for the later high school years. Before we dive in, let's recap why this matters so much. A debt-free education gives your PK financial freedom for future ministry and sets an example of good stewardship. In part one, we covered preparation during middle school and early high school, and even about how you can be teaching your kids about money from an early age. So if you missed it, I encourage you to go back and listen. Now, the number one thing that will affect whether your student goes to school debt-free or not is mindset and commitment. You have to commit. You have to believe that graduating debt-free is possible. This belief is crucial. If you don't believe it's possible, that's going to guide your decisions and whether you're successful in this process. And second, you have to make a firm commitment to avoid debt. You have to say student loans are not an option. If student loans are an option, then you won't see other possibilities when a problem comes up. You'll just say, oh, I guess I have to take out more debt. And that's just the way it'll be. If you take them completely off the table and say, we're not doing this, we are not doing student loans, then it will do two things. One is it will force you to be wiser in your decisions all the way through the college process. And second, it will help you see and look for more creative ideas because the quote easy option is no longer available. Student loans have a long-lasting impact. They can end up delaying major life decisions and limiting ministry opportunities. And so I encourage you to treat no debt as a non-negotiable family value. If you decide not to do that, you're still going to get benefit out of this episode. But this goal requires family unity. Both parents and students are going to need to be on board. So you need to be having regular family discussions about your college plans and your finances, especially these last 2 years before your student heads off to college. And related to mindset, it's really crucial to understand the true purpose of college. It's about getting a marketable degree. College is about getting a marketable degree that qualifies you for a career. The goal is employment, not just education, and it's not just getting an experience. Yes, you will have fun and you'll learn lots of things about yourself while in college, but that is not the purpose of it. You want to be thinking about college with what is the job that I'm trying to get? And yes, that may change, but having some kind of direction. What is the job I want to get? What is the degree or the major that is required for that job? And use that to steer a lot of our decisions around school. So now let's get into some resources that can help us once we've set that mindset. Now we've got that mindset, let's get into some resources. I want you to be creating a comprehensive college funding plan, and I will include a link. I'll include a download for this in the show notes that you can fill out and you can start to put together. You want to be planning ahead and working your way backward. So really, first off, starting with what are the possible jobs that I would want my student having your student start with first having your student start off with what are some potential jobs that I want to look into, what are the degrees required for those jobs, right? And then we're starting with and then we're going to estimate what's the total cost of attendance for potential schools. And those, you're going to find that cost ranges really widely from whether it's a private school or a public school, what the reputation of the school is. And keep in mind, as long as your school is accredited and has the degree that you need, it doesn't really matter how popular or famous it is. Nobody cares, with some very few exceptions. When you go to your doctor's office and you get your exam, you might look at the certificates they have on the wall because you're bored and standing there, but you're not going to choose your doctor based on what college they went to. You're choosing them based on their qualifications, and their degree is part of that qualifications and the fact that it's from an accredited school, but you don't really care what school they go to. So we're estimating the total cost of attendance for potential schools and breaking down whatever funding sources are available to you. So do you have savings that you've set aside? Does your student have savings they've set aside? Are there family members that have put in savings or have offered to contribute? And then the other sources that you'll want to list out would be things like scholarships or getting a job. And we'll talk about those more in a little bit. And then making sure that you're setting realistic goals and timelines. So you want to be communicating with your student and setting the expectation. If you are not in a place to pay for college, it's okay. But they need to know that so that you and they can be planning accordingly. Let me say that again. If you are not in a place to be able to fund your student's college, it's okay. You are not morally or ethically obligated to pay for university education for your child. You're not. Now, I think you are obligated to guide them through this process because you're a parent and that's part of what parents do. But you're not obligated to pay for their school. And at the end of the day, going to school is not a mandatory requirement. So if you're still in debt, if you don't have an emergency fund saved, if you're not contributing to retirement, then I don't want you paying for your student's college. There's other ways that you can help them out in that process. And we'll talk through those. If you are in that place, then yes, be saving for your student's college. And there's some suggestions in part 1 of this series that talk about where you can be putting some of those savings. But at this point, when you're making your plan, go ahead and set some realistic goals and timelines. Set deadlines for scholarship applications or standardized tests, that kind of a thing. And schedule a time regularly, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's twice a year, to discuss your project's progress and be ready to make changes as circumstances change, right? Your junior in high school may not actually know what they want to do for a job, and what they think they might want to do might change. That's okay. But it's good to have a plan and have some kind of direction. Okay, now, alongside whatever we do to prepare for college itself, it's really important to be teaching our teens financial literacy, because they're going to need that financial education both to prepare for school and to be able to actually get through school debt-free. You can be teaching them budgeting basics. You can introduce them to the EveryDollar app or a spreadsheet, or even just some envelopes to track their income and their expenses. Practice saving when they get paid. Practice setting some of it aside for giving, saving, and spending. And there's some resources that can really help to educate them in this process. So one is the book Debt-Free Degree by Anthony O'Neill. Another is the Financial Peace University course, which your whole family can do. And a lot of times when I lead this course, I'll have teens take it alongside their parents. And that goes through really everything from budgeting to college to saving for retirement to buying a house. So it gives them a really good comprehensive picture. The Total Money Makeover is a great book, although it's speaking to just your student will just need to keep in mind that it's speaking to a different season in life than most of them are going to be in. And then if you want something that's geared specifically towards teens, there's a course called Foundations in Personal Finance. It's a school curriculum and also available as a homeschool. And even if your school doesn't offer it and your student is not homeschooled, you can still buy it for your family. So I'll include the link to that course in the show notes as well. But you want to be helping your student start to understand the true cost of college: tuition, room and board, books, fees, living expenses, and how those costs can really add up over the 4 years. You want to set clear financial expectations and rules of engagement. So what you as parents can contribute, if anything. Maybe you have funds set aside. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't have funds set aside, but you can contribute a certain amount per semester or per year. Or maybe you can provide them a place to live and they can continue to live in your house and eat your food while they're going to school. So set clear expectations of what you're able to contribute. Make sure to set clear guidelines and requirements for your contributions. So if you're going to pay for their school, or if you're going to match what they pay for their school, or if you're going to allow them to live at home rent free or anything like this, are you having certain requirements around their academic performance, around their behavior? Are you requiring them to be in church every Sunday? Maybe you're requiring them to be in church every Sunday. Maybe you're requiring them to be getting B's or better in their classes. Maybe you require them to show you a budget every month. You get to decide. Maybe you have requirements around drinking, partying, or living a Christ-like life, whatever, but make sure that those, if you want to set, I recommend if you are contributing towards their education, there shouldn't be any entitlement around this. It's not something that you are required to provide. So if you are choosing to provide it and you're able to bless them in that way, there should be some guardrails around that. And you want to be communicating, and there should be some guardrails around that. And you want to be communicating that and setting those expectations up front and early on. Now let's talk about really maximizing those high school years. So you want to have your student be preparing for and taking the ACT or the SAT, and they can work with their school counselor and look into any potential colleges to decide which of those exams is the best one for them to take. There are also online programs that you can use to prepare for those. And so I recommend, take the pre-test, take it's the PSAT for the SAT. Take the pre-test so they can see how they'll perform and where they'll need to improve. Take the test prep course, because these exams are going to help both with their college application process and also qualify them for scholarships, which is money. So definitely worth taking the investment to pay for a test prep course to help them perform well to get the scholarships that will help pay for school. Also, think about balancing academics with extracurricular activities. So extracurricular activities are great because they help your student learn leadership skills, they help them build friendships and relationships, and really develop their own personal brand. Sometimes they can be an opportunity to explore future careers as well. And so they could open the doors to scholarships, whether it's specific to that activity for that organization, or because it helps your student be a whole person, not just a brain, right? You do want to be careful with overcommitment. And if your student is one of those, some of us like to say yes to everything and we get really excited, and then we overcommit ourselves and we have a hard time doing well in all of those things. I think, in middle school or early high school, try lots of things and figure out what you want to do. Later in high school, choose a few things that you can enjoy and do really well. While your students in high school, they can be looking into taking potentially dual enrollment classes with a local community college. They could be taking AP classes or taking potentially CLEP tests to be able to earn college credit or meet some of their college requirements before they even graduate high school. And that can be a way to save money. And also, those dual enrollment courses and those AP classes are also helping to prepare them for the workload that they'll have in college. Okay, so let's talk about probably the second most important factor in going to school debt-free. So the first one is mindset that we talked about at the beginning of the episode. But the second most important factor is college choice. And so you want to be working with your student to think about college programs, to think about college choice, not just thinking about what's a famous school, not even just thinking about what's a private Christian school. We're not going to exclude those, but we just want to have that awareness, right? Because there can be a massive tuition distance between a public school with an in-state tuition versus a private Christian school. So first, I want you to consider community college for your student. And I want your student to consider community college. Community college is a great option because you're getting a quality state education at a much lower price. Some states it's even free, which is amazing. And so your student can typically live at home and save a ton on tuition, and a lot of times community colleges will offer more flexible schedules as well, because a lot of community college students are working while they're in school. And so this can be a way that your student can save a ton on tuition for those first 2 years. A lot of times community colleges will have a relationship with nearby public universities. So for instance, I grew up in San Diego County, and the two community colleges close to me both had transfer agreements with the University of California system and the Cal State system. So they make that process of transferring really simple for transferring to a public university. If your student's going to transfer to a private school, they can still do that. They should just be working with their advisors at both the transfer school and the community college to make sure that they're selecting the right classes and making sure that they're taking classes that they will be able to transfer and that will meet requirements for their degree. You should also be considering in-state public universities. These are your tax dollars at work, just like community colleges, and they can be a really significant cost savings compared to attending an out-of-state school or private school. And sometimes there are state-specific scholarship programs as well, but the actual tuition is going to be a lot cheaper. And you may, depending on where you live, you may have an in-state school that's close enough for your student to live at home if that's something that you and your student decide is a good fit. You should also be considering trade schools. So there are some careers where there are some really well-paying careers in the trades where a four-year college is not the right way to prepare for that career. A trade school is going to be the right way to prepare for that career. And so that can be a fantastic way to get a really great education, get a great well-paying job, and be able to get into the workforce right away. So again, that's why we're starting with what's the job I want to go into and what's the required training for that job. So now let's talk about some of your students may feel that they are called to ministry. And this is a little tough because most of your public universities are not necessarily going to offer the classes that they need to be able to get a minister's credential or to prepare for ministry. So there's a couple options that you have available to you, right? So you can really work the scholarship angle and go to that private Christian school for 4 years. That is an option. We'll talk about scholarships in a moment. You could split the difference and say, I'm going to go to community college for the first 2 years so I can save as much on tuition as absolutely possible, and at the same time save up, get scholarships to be able to pay for those last 2 years at a private Christian school. You can also decide to go to a school of ministry or one of these other types of programs. So look with your denomination and what their credential requirements are. Some denominations require a 4-year degree for minister's credentials, others do not. And so if they do not, a lot of times they'll have different options for School of Ministry, which are like continuing ed level classes to meet those requirements to get a minister's credential. So that can be a really great option. Now, say your student wants to be able to do more than just ministry, or they still want to be able to get a 4-year degree. They could get a great 4-year degree at a state school, and let's discount it even more by doing half of it at a community college, and then do School of Ministry on the side to meet their credential requirements. So that is also an option. And some of the ministry schools will have a transfer opportunity where they can transfer those credits later, a 4-year Christian university, to be able to apply them towards their bachelor's or to be able to use them to meet prerequisites towards a master's degree later. So with those, you're definitely going to want to check with, if you're part of a denomination, what their requirements are for credentials, as well as the transfer requirements for those specific schools. And if you do work with a school that has a School of Ministry that has a transfer agreement, make sure to read the fine print and understand it so you don't have any surprises later. For instance, some of them require you have to take all the classes and get your credential, and then you can transfer credits, and it's only up to this amount or whatever they choose, right? So just make sure that you have an understanding of those requirements before you go in. So college, again, college choice is the number 2 factor, with the number 1 being mindset. College choice is the number 2 factor that's going to affect whether your student goes to school debt free, and it's because it's going to affect that price tag so much. Now, I'm not beating on our private Christian colleges. There are some amazing institutions out there. You have to be able to pay for it. So if that's the choice, first off, make sure that's the choice, not because that's the best thing for your student and not because it's your alma mater or it's just where you want them to be able to go or where they want to be able to go. But if that's the choice, then you can work a plan to be able to go there debt free. It just may take some creativity. Maybe again, it might look like doing community college first and transferring or that sort of thing. Okay, so now let's talk about scholarship and financial aid strategies. As you start working through those last 2 years of high school, you want your student to be applying for scholarships. And I've heard of some parents setting a requirement of a certain number every day or a certain number every week that they need to. And there's going to be scholarships that are school specific. There's going to be local or national or specific to a certain organization. There are tons and tons of scholarships out there. There are even scholarships specific to pastors' kids and missionary kids. And so I'm pulling together a list of those and I'll include that in the show notes for you. So you want your student to be applying to lots and lots of scholarships, not just the big ones, but the small ones too. Here's why. So those big ones, they can be great. They're going to be way, way more competitive. So yes, still apply to them, but your student is going to have a much stronger educational resume, so to speak, to be able to get those. The small ones, they may be the only person that applies. And so they'll have a much higher likelihood of being able to get those smaller scholarships. So be applying to both. And like I said, some parents will set a goal for how many. We need to teach our young people professional communication skills and professional follow-up. Things like, if you want a teacher to write a recommendation for you, how are you going to ask that? What information are you going to give them ahead of time? And how are you going to thank them for that? Writing a thank you note, that kind of a thing, right? When you're doing research or you're asking for information, if I send somebody an email asking for something and they don't get back to me, it's not on them. It's my responsibility to follow up. And a lot of our young people may not have learned this kind of thing in school. And we've learned it either in school or we've learned it in the workplace, hopefully, right? And so teach your student how to communicate professionally, how to write a professional email. It's good to have, whether it's you or somebody else that can look over some of those messages before they send them, and to be able to follow up, to reach out when they're working through this application process. You should also be considering, especially as your student gets closer to college, looking at work-study programs. So work-study programs are typically going to be offered by the university, and they're going to be part of the financial aid package that you get offered with the university. And so you have to be awarded the work-study package, and then you have to go actually get yourself a campus job. So you have to take the steps for that, right? But they can be great because they are work experience, and unlike getting a job off campus, they're more likely to work around your student's school schedule. So that can be a great opportunity. And you should look into tuition reimbursement through employers. There are companies that have great education benefits, and you can ask around in your church or in your community to find out about some of these companies. Have your student do their research to know, okay, so maybe this is, a company that will pay for your tuition if you go work for them for a certain number of years after. Sometimes it's a company that will pay for your tuition, but it has to be this kind of degree program, or it has to be at this specific school. So just make sure that you, again, do your research and read the fine print on those things before you commit to anything. And some alternative ways to be getting ready to pay for school. So your student may want to take a gap year to work and save. If they've got a great job or the possibility for a great job that they're qualified for that pays really well, it can be great to take a year to work and save for school, but they need to do it with a plan. They need to be intentional about how much am I going to spend again, right? With the primary goal of this job not being to take a break from being a student. The primary goal of this job is to earn money to pay for my degree. And there's also some great programs for military service like ROTC, and there's some other ones. These programs often will have some kind of a service commitment while you're in school, for instance, doing training over your summers. and they will pay for your degree, and then you commit to serving for a certain number of years after. And so those are worthwhile, especially if the military has a career path that is similar to what your student already wants to do. Or if your student's not really sure what they want to do, then a military service can be a great option as well. And then let's think about practical tips for saving money. So encourage your student to have a part-time job during school, and if they can get full-time when school is out, that's even better. They're going to have to learn to balance work with study with any extracurricular activities. So they're going to have to be intentional and, choose those hours wisely, because doing well in school is still the first priority. Doing well in school is still the first priority, but it can be a great way to learn to navigate that balance that they'll want to have while they're actually in college as well. And it can be a great way to earn work experience, to get some letters of recommendation, to try out some possible careers that they might want to go into, to build relationships with people that may be able to connect them with the future job, because the number one best way to get a job is to have a relationship with somebody that works there. So getting them some work experience while they're in high school is a great idea. And make sure they're setting a savings goal. So suggest maybe they save a percentage of all their income towards college. So suggest that they open a separate college savings account, separate from anything. Now, they may decide they need to prioritize, for instance, buying a car before they save for school. That's okay. But if so, have them set a limit on it. That your high schooler does not need a new car. So, you can have them set a limit for a cheap, reasonable car, and then say, okay, now we're going to save for school as well. If there's any internships that they can be doing, especially paying ones, but even if it's an unpaid internship, that can be a great opportunity over the summer to be able to build their resume for college applications and for scholarship applications, and also build some of those relationships for future employment. So, and just to recap though, one of the most important things aside from college choice is that they need to be working in that scholarship engine. The scholarships are out there, but I know for me, I personally did not apply to nearly enough of them when I was a junior and senior in high school. Looking back, I definitely wish I had. Okay, so, and then to wrap up, just remember that preparing for debt-free college is a journey that requires commitment and planning and teamwork between you and your student. If you need help figuring out your specific strategy, you can schedule a debt-free college strategy session with a financial coach at pastorsandmoney.com/college strategy. And the link to that will be in the show notes also. And that'll be a time for us to sit down and look with you and your student and figure out what resources do you have available to you, where does your student want to be able to go with their career, what degree is required for that, and how you're going to pay for it. So we'd love to be able to help you out. And in our next episode, we'll discuss what to do if your student is already in college, or if you are the student who's in college and you're trying to figure out how to deal with the debt that I already have. Thank you for tuning in. If you found this helpful, please share it with other families who might benefit. Pastoral families, or honestly, even if they're not, because 99% of this applies to families with high school students, regardless of whether they're in the ministry or not. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. And Patreon supporters can submit questions for a future Q&A. And you can also find additional resources on our website at pastorsandmoney.com/podcast. Until next time, this is Suzanne Hunt reminding you that with faith, planning, and perseverance, a debt-free degree is possible for your PK. God bless.